Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Jeevan Kalanithi, CEO and co-founder of OpenSpace. Thanks for being on the show today, Jeevan.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. Let's jump into it. So look, you've had an impressive career with prior CEO, president, founder roles. And I always like to start with our guest's background. So to kick things off, can you give us a snapshot of your journey leading up to co-founding OpenSpace, and were there any key experiences that helped shape your path?
Oh, yeah. I guess I could take an hour on this, but I'll try to keep it short. So, yeah, I guess in terms of leading up into OpenSpace. So, I'll just rewind the clock to to college, really. And what I got interested there intellectually was very much what makes thinking things special, like people or even animals. So I was interested in neuroscience, interested in AI, and ended up studying AI. And in particular, I was very interested in the real physical world, that we're animals, we live in real physical reality, and we're smart in relationship to that. I know this sounds very intellectual and stuff, but I guess it was, And then so I did some philosophy too. And then after that, I went to school in the Bay Area where I am right now, and then moved to New York and did a bunch of random stuff. I worked on movies,
Saw that.
worked in smart projects, and worked in neuroscience labs kind of all over the place. It was very fun. Ended up going to grad school at this program called the Media Lab at MIT, which is where I met my co-founders of both my companies. And, heading out of grad school, a friend of mine, Dave Merrill, we were grad school friends, but we're also, friends in undergrad too. We're roommates, same major, we're in a band together. Just talking to him yesterday. And we decided to start a company based on some work we were doing. We kind of lucked out and got this slot to do a presentation at the TED conference, which is pretty cool. Launched our first company, which is hardware, and I'll come back to that in a moment, why that was an informative experience, and ended up selling that company, which was cool, to a company called 3D Robotics. 3D Robotics is a drone company, since been acquired by Esri. So for those of you that are in the know, that's like a big GIS, Geo Information Systems company. And we launched a drone in partnership with GoPro, and then we launched a product in partnership with Autodesk called SiteScan, which scans construction sites from the air. And ended up being the president of that company. And then when I decided my tour of duty was over, took a bunch of time off, a year plus, and kind of didn't do much of anything, which was great. My kids were littler at the time, so daily zoo visits was awesome.
Yeah, great timing. Yeah.
So, heading into OpenSpace, what I would really emphasize are maybe a few things. And of course, this may make more sense when we talk about what the company does. But number one is always been interested in this AI question, like what is special about systems that can kind of solve cognitive problems, especially in real physical reality. Number two, just I have a lot of scar tissue on trying to build real physical things. First company was a hardware company, and it was brutal, man. There's really complicated stuff, and just knowing what the heck is going on in the factory, I just wish I had a teleporter. There's so many times where we had these like near-death experiences as a company that were not that big of a deal. They were just lack of context. If you could just see what was there, the problem would be solved. And I saw that problem repeated over and over and over as we started the construction companies. It's brutal, man. I was like, man, this is like such a tough, difficult job. It's so important. And we're not doing right by these folks to give them some tools that they could really benefit from. And my co-founders, Mike and Philip, are awesome. I know these guys for a really long time. They went off and started a company after grad school. Mike did a computer vision company that he sold to Twitter. And I always thought it'd be fun to work with those guys again. So doing anything with them would have been fun. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the prelude to open space. We had some sense of a big problem we wanted to solve, not just in an intellectual kind of reading McKinsey reports kind of way, but more of a lived experience kind of way. And had some insight into how computer vision was progressing in AI, that we could build something that we thought that was pretty new and couldn't have been done before, that would really, really help these folks out. And then I had joined a venture capital firm called Lux Capital as an EIR at Open Space. And that helped us really stress test the idea. Could this be a high growth technology company in general? Does it have the right ingredients? Obviously, the answer to that was yes. Started the company, and it's been growing pretty nicely ever since.
Amazing. So yeah, let's talk more about the origin story. Can you tell us what inspired the founding and the initial problem that you guys set out to solve with open space, and any, again, pivotal moments or inspiration behind that founding, apart from just being aware of the tech?
Yeah. So, like in a very brief nutshell, what Open Space does is, so we're a computer vision and AI company, and what we are trying to do is to simplify how the world gets built. Like, how do we make construction and maintenance of all these structures that we're in better? Because it's really, I mean, anybody that reads a newspaper knows that we have a real problem with just the infrastructure and housing in our world. We can't put enough of it in place quickly enough. So we're trying to make a dent in that. And what we do in particular is make it really incredibly easy to create a full visual record of any space inside and out. So you can see what's there without literally physically needing to be there. And you can do it over and over again. That is, you can image this job site all the time. So you create kind of this time machine or instant replay or photographic memory. You pick your metaphor. It just takes all the opinions out of getting a project built and replaces it with facts. You can know pictures with 1,000 words. So we can get more into what we actually do later, but that's the basic gist. And in terms of the origin story, yeah, as I was saying, I was kind of not doing too much. It was nice. I was taking a break from work life. And Mike called me one day, and he's like, "Hey, Philip and I." So Mike, Philip, and I are the co-founders of the company, and he was like, "Hey, Philip and I are working on this idea. It uses these new cameras called 360 cameras, and we've made this way where you can kind of use the 360 camera to create kind of this virtual reality version of a real space, so you can see anything around. And wouldn't that be cool?" And at that time, Mike had started his company, and he stayed in Cambridge, Mass, to start his company. But he's from California. He was looking to move back, and he was like, "Yeah, it's such a pain to know if I can move into a place. I'm just looking at photos or descriptions, and I have to fly all the way. It just doesn't make sense. I wish I could just immerse myself in the space from a distance, and that would make my life a lot easier." He was describing the way he and Philip were trying to approach this in a much simpler, consumer grade way without using like complex hardware. And I was listening to him, I thought to myself, and then I told him, I was like, you could really use this. Not just consumers, but enterprises, builders. They're a huge part of the economy. Perhaps the biggest part of the economy is trying to just build and maintain real physical spaces. I think this is a thing that could help them. And I had that insight, right, because of 3D robotics. This is the customers that we were serving. And so he was like, "Cool, man. Well, do you want to work on this idea?" And I was like, "Okay, sure. I'm not sure. Why not?" Like,
Not doing anything else?
yeah, exactly. And I did take I tried to take at least a very disciplined approach to it. It's like, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to take a real lean startup owner's manual approach, where we're not going to just like navel gaze as tech dudes, but really immerse ourselves in the lives of the customer. And that was doable, right? Because I had gotten to know a lot of builders prior to even this Mike calling me. And that was really key looking back, you know, building products for people. If you don't have some sense of what their lives are really like, it's you can go on the wrong direction because the details matter, you know. And so when we built Open Space, we bootstrapped it, to begin with, and we were just like, interns almost on some construction sites. I just called some PMs. I'm like, hey, remember me? Like, we had this other thing. If I can hang out on your job site and help out and just try out some of these new prototypes, like, would you be okay with that? They're like, yeah, sounds good. And looking back at that, that's not normal. Like, you can't just walk into a construction site and be like, hey, they'd be like, get out of here. But because we had these existing relationships, it
Yeah.
allowed us to do that. And so we just iterated through some of the early prototypes and then really hit pay dirt with one version. And there was a real aha moment around that, for sure, which we can get into. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the summary was we had an understanding of what was difficult about the lives of these guys, and Mike and Philip had kind of a cool idea. We just needed to aim it at people who really had a ton of pain around this particular problem of like, what is going on over there. That's the
Yeah.
question that they would need to answer. And came up with a way that we could solve that for them that was very simple and fast and easy to use.
That's awesome. It's a theme we've touched on multiple times on this in this show with different guests, but about that customer centric approach. And like you said, it's not normal. You probably wouldn't get access to the building sites or the people without existing relationships. But time and time again, we've spoken about, we've had VCs mention some of the best companies or the winners that they look at or who they want to invest in. There's obviously the technologist side of things, but then they need industry specific people as well, people who know the pain, who have access to that customer. You think about like healthcare as well. It's a hard place to just get into or understand the ins and outs. So it's a great lesson for people, or key point for people to take away, having access firsthand, being on the front line and understanding the pain point. Otherwise, you're kind of building in a vacuum.
I totally agree, and it's a challenge, because you kind of need to do two things at once, which is this. When you look at different companies and different founders, of course, most startups don't work at all, so they're go to zero, which is sad, but that's just the way it is. But then you look at other ones that have positive outcomes at different scales, and I kind of have noticed this pattern. You can have a technologist-led company where that's really smart technology people trying to solve a problem for XYZ person or industry. And generally speaking, if those companies fail, it's not because they can't get the thing to work that they set out to build. It's because they built something nobody wants, you know? Um, and that's bad. And then they go to zero.
Yeah.
But this other side of like having a company that's been founded by someone who truly deeply understands the customer pain, that's not actually silver bullet either. Because what can happen there is they're very likely to be right about solving a real problem because they've been there, they've walked in those shoes. But they can often have what I call low ceiling outcomes because they're just picking something that's right in front of their face that may not have a lot of scale to it because it's solving a small piece of the pie. And they may not have enough of the right naivete really to like tackle something in kind of a weird or unusual way, that someone who's a little less familiar with the space might come up with. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to have this very weird combination of, the customer, you really get what's painful about them, but you have enough kind of people that don't quite know that you can come up with something a little different that could really, really be disruptive, to use that overused word, and scale. And then, of course, you need to actually be able to deliver it. So, like if you're a VC, just like picking people that have been, XYZ role from one industry and be like, I'm just going to back them. It's not always going to work. You might have companies that can't grow that fast. So it's tricky.
Yeah, that first principles thinking is so key. And like you said, the naivety and the you have to be, again, sounds cliche, but out of the box
Mhm.
thinking. But if you're not conditioned to think the way that the industry that you're trying to serve thinks, or being
Yeah.
concerned about that red tape or any other roadblocks that why people haven't done it, then it can have that huge impact.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, to take an open space example, our category that people describe us as called reality capture. It's like there's reality and you want to digitize it somehow. Um, and we didn't make up that term. It existed prior to our existence. What normally it meant was laser scanning. So these are like, if you've like driven by a construction site, you might have seen this kind of thing in a tripod that looks like this big weird device. Those are oftentimes laser scanners, and they're very impressive. They like shoot a bunch of lasers out and they measure a space in extreme accuracy, 3D detail. Um, and they require an expert to operate them, and they're not cheap. These can be like 50 grand. Um, but if we're totally immersed in that part of construction or in or industrial um, maintenance, I'd call it, or in the reality capture industry, you'd be like, that is reality capture. And in fact, if something was not able to deliver that accuracy, you'd be like, it's stupid. That doesn't work. And I think what we realized is like, those laser scanners are great. They are useful, but 80% of the time you don't need all that stuff. You just need
Yeah.
something that's way faster and easier to use and simpler. It doesn't quite have all the bells and whistles, would probably be really valuable. And I think that required a little bit of rejecting some kind of orthodoxy that existed in the space. Because if
Yeah.
you talk to some customers that use that type of technology with our original idea, they would have been like, that's stupid. Like, it doesn't do ABC. You need to have these many more buttons. And we're like, well, maybe. But I think like there's these other stakeholders in the project that would really benefit from what we're doing, like a highly simplified version. So that was a little bit of a benefit of not being overly super steeped in the way the industry had been working to that point.
Makes a lot of sense. So you touched on one of like your aha moments, which I want to talk about in the early stages that you found. What were some of the challenges that you guys faced? Does anything come up there?
Like really early on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the way I'd put that is that's sort of the job always, but especially early on, is to like, what is the riskiest, most gnarly, scariest thing about whatever you're working on? And that's the top of your list to deal with, which goes
Yeah.
against human nature, I should say, because you're like, it's scary, don't want to deal with it. And you sort of run away from it, which, I'm a human, I do that too, but you try to discipline yourself to not do that. So if I think about early on, what were the big questions? Well, some of them are pretty basic, high level that anybody would have. Is like, will anybody pay for it? Will they be like, it's cool, but I wouldn't really pay for it? Like, that's a big, scary question. So getting people to pay you for your thing, even when it sucks and barely exists, is super important. Not because you're trying to get the revenue. You're just trying to understand, are you building something that's actually valuable enough for someone to open up their wallet?
Yeah.
So that was a challenge just to make that happen. And it wasn't, I mean, for us, it wasn't that hard, luckily, because I think we hit on something that had value. So I was able to prove that there was enough demand there. Then another thing was, details, subtle things. So the way open space works is you have a person on a construction site who's going for what's called a job walk. That's when you walk around to see how things are going. It's like a normal thing people do. And we said, people walk around job sites. So what if they just did it and they had a camera that they just popped on their hard hat while they did their job walk, a little consumer camera. And then as a byproduct of that walk, they could upload the video and then we could have this nice, easy to use visual record, complete record of their job site. Seems cool. But would people actually do that? And one of the questions that, you can't get this in a spreadsheet, you just have to be in there, is like, is it going to just be dorky and weird? Are people going to be like, that's just weird? I don't think so. We had to confront that head on. And the finding is, it is dorky and it is weird.
Yeah.
But Two things. It was these guys are like, it's worth it to us to do it. Like the value's there. And can you just make sure that I'm not wearing it all the time? Which is how the system works. You can take the camera out of your vest, pop it on your hard hat, take it off. Even down to the way we design the hard hat mounts, so it's easy to pop it on and off. Like our first version was kind of a pain to get clicked on and off. And we
Yeah.
know people wouldn't use it as much because it was just weird to be like the weird camera guy. And so that was a challenge. And I think we solved it both kind of by asking the question, understanding the customer's mindset really early on, and then little details that reduce that kind of dork factor. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the two things that came up early. And then I guess maybe to the aha moment, if I can just segue into that, it was a bit of a challenge that I think we identified. So, so we're working on this project. This is not too far from where I live, and this was a multi-family, like an apartment building, in Berkeley. And so this was there was just three of us, and we had this like very crappy prototype. It wasn't crappy. It wasn't a usable prototype. I'll say that.
Okay.
It did some cool stuff. And the way that worked was that you had a 360 camera. And again, these are just, you can buy them on Amazon or whatever. This is not exotic hardware. Like GoPro makes one. And the way our software worked is that you take the camera on like a tripod and you'd go into one room, take a photo, go to the next room, take a photo, and so on. And if it's under construction, then you're picking your way through rebar or whatever before concrete's poured. And we designed it, like simplicity and ease of use was very important to me as always. But this lesson here is you can never underestimate how simple you need to get. So like this project was about to pour concrete. And so I was like, this is a good time to try out our prototype. I'm going to go out there and digitize this one podium where they hadn't poured the concrete yet. So I go out there and do it. And then I'm in the trailer and like up doing the little scripts to turn it into this kind of Google Street View style thing that is the open space user experience. So I do that and it works. And then the PM of that job comes in and I'm like, hey, check it out. This is the latest of what we got. What do you think? And he was very stoked. He was like, man, God, this would really save my butt. Like having a view of where all the rebar is before concrete is poured is so key because concrete, there's not a Control Z undo button in construction, right?
Yeah.
So if something goes wrong, fixing it is very bad, especially after you pour concrete. And he's like, God, there's been so many times where I've gotten burned, where there's some question about where's this penetration or this post-tension cable, this kind of stuff. So he's sending me all these good product market fit vibes,
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I think we're onto something here. And then he asked me this question. He's like, okay, this is cool, Jeevan. By the way, how long did it take you to like get all these images? And I told him it took a while, because I'm kind of picking my way through this rebar and kind of putting the camera here, putting the camera there. And when I told him how long it took, he was very blunt. He was like, well, it's a cool idea, but there's no way in hell would ever use it. Of course, he used a more colorful word than hell, but
Because of
and
the time it would take?
yeah, and I was like, well, why? He's like, Jeevan, you're on this job site all the time. Who besides you would have time to do what you just did? Like our guys are working their ass off. Like it just takes, it's worth it. I like it, but it just takes too long. Like I'm not going to do it. I'm not here every day, referring to himself. Like my assistant superintendents, they're busy. And I was like, yeah, I mean, totally. You're right. I was like, that's reality, But then the aha moment was where he kind of gave us the idea. And I got to give ourselves a little bit of credit. I was leading in this direction already. But he was like, you know what would be good though? Like I walk around the job site. That's what part of my job description to see how things are going. My assistant superintendents do it. So instead of like walking around this tripod, if I could just like wear that little camera and it could just go along for the ride, and then you guys do whatever computer stuff afterwards to like give me the result you're showing me now. It's like, we would definitely buy that. And I was like, okay, message received. I mean, those are the marching orders. It just has to work in this passive way. And it was an aha moment because it was like very clear as to what the bar was for what the user experience needed to be. Confirmed what I thought we needed to do anyways, but really crystallized it that with the direction we're going, we had to be like, no, this is not good enough. And it just so happened that it was technically hard what he was asking to do, which I think has given us some competitive advantage, because getting it to work, getting that type of experience to work all the time, super reliably and very, very fast is not easy. So yeah, I mean, kind of a long story, but just one of these early things about you can have whatever principles you want, but you just need to be out there with your customer and really take the punch of feedback and then deal with it. And that helps us a lot.
Very cool. Yeah, super interesting. Thanks for all of those details. It's like a real glimpse at how a customer or an engaged customer can really have an impact on your product, what you build, like say the product market fit and stuff like that. And having to listen to them, listen to the whys about it, like the reasoning behind decisions, I think is key. So the technology you guys have built, it seems pretty unique in enabling like these 360-degree site documentation. Can we dive more into that? Like walk us through the core of OpenStack's tech, any insights into how this computer vision actually works and why you guys are unique?
Yeah. So I think from our customer's point of view, what is unique, what is the selling point is that our products are just simple, reliable, and fast, like best in class, no question, at doing the job they're assigned to do, which is to create this full visual record of projects. There are a bunch of other stuff that we do on top of that at this point in the company, by the way, in terms of pulling insights out of that image data and comparing it to 3D models and all that kind of stuff, which is key. But that core is one of our strengths. So a little insight into how it works at the high level. So as I mentioned before, the user experience for our customers that's out there on the project that wants to like go for a walk and kind of create this visual record, digitize their job site, it's pretty simple. They have one of these cameras and they can hold it on a stick, they can put it on their hard hat, doesn't matter. I mean, you could put it on anything, a golf cart or a robot dog or whatever. But there's a lot of people out there walking around, so that's the most common user experience. And then, they open up the Open Space app and it's like it's starting a video recording. It's like, okay, here's my location. And then I hit start. And then they can just walk around. And everything sort of starts happening in the background. The camera's sort of clicking away, taking a video. And they go about their walk. Then when they're done, they just upload that. And then we process it. And then boom, this like kind of Google Street View like thing comes out at the end. Okay, so how do we do it? The core technologies we borrow from are really from the branch of AI that is associated with robotics primarily, which is how do you know where a thing is in a space, especially if it's navigating around, especially if you do not have GPS or some kind of absolute signal of where you're located in physical space. Because in indoors, there's no GPS, and a lot of most construction's indoors. So like, how do you know where the thing is? And so there's various fields called indoor navigation and GPS denied environments and different terms for this. But essentially, you're trying to figure out where is this thing? I need this camera at every moment in time as it's moving around. So we used like a basket of techniques to figure that problem out. And a robot needs to figure that out in real time, right? While the thing's moving around. For us, we do it after they've uploaded the video. So there's different techniques that we can use given that. And I think the reason why our system is like what I think is best in class and very fast is kind of a scale thing in some ways. Like, first thing is we just had great co-founders, great technology partners that just had the absolute best way to make that system reliable and fast. And the second thing is we've amassed a ton of data over the years. It's actually kind of a fun number. It's like I think our customers have collected around 37 billion square feet of imagery data. And so each time someone does a capture, we can try to learn from it and improve that core algorithm to make it reliable and fast. And it's not like a silver bullet thing, I'll tell you, Greg. There's like lots of different little things that we do to make the technology work quickly, and we're just focused on it. And so we just chip away and make it work. And it's kind of, I guess I have to say, from my CEO perspective, or even my investor shareholder perspective, what I like is that it's like I said, there's no silver bullet. Getting these different technologies to work together well is just you just have to keep grinding away at it, and it yields results, which we've done over time. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun actually looking at what's going on under the hood and how much more complex it is in a way today than it was when we first started. But the complexity is on behalf of simplicity for the user. Like we take on the complexity of all the technology under the hood, so they have a very simple user experience on their end.
I see. So what kind of impact is open space having on the market that you're serving, on those industries? And do you have any particular memorable success stories or standout client successes that you can share with us?
Yeah, totally. I'm glad to say I have an unending supply of those by now.
Really?
But I'll pick a few. So
Okay.
just set some context, like the idea of having some visual documentation or photos of what's going on in a job site reality capture. We did not invent that idea. In fact, people have been doing it since cameras were invented. The question is why? Why do people take photos of construction sites or factories or whatever? And this boils down to a picture of 1,000 words. Okay, if that's true, why does that matter? It's just to deal with issues. If there's conflict or if there's some problem, you can read all the reports in the world about construction site ABC, but just seeing it is believing. It's just the facts are the facts. So you have prior to open space, like some companies that you'd hire to go and take photos of key areas that you think you might need for later. As y'all probably know, like it's a contentious industry, and the difference between profit and loss is huge. Could be one conflict can destroy a project's profitability. So, so what we came in and said is like we recognize that existing pain point. Open space is not like an evangelical sale. Like people kind of already know the pain, and we just have a better mousetrap. It's a faster, easier, more comprehensive way to do this thing that you need to do anyways. Of course, once you do it, it unlocks lots more value than just having like a binder of photos. So what are some of the wins? Um, you know, I'll start with some from really early on and then a couple that are more recent. Like a few months after deciding we should raise some money and start building this for reals, we were deployed to maybe like 2 or 3 job sites in total. The number has gone up by many orders of magnitude since then. But I remember getting a call from a superintendent on this project. This guy's name is Tim. And he was like, "You guys just saved my ass." I was like, "Tell me more." And okay, the real version of the story is like so long, I'll try to compress it. But suffice to say, there is a dispute he worked the general contractor, between him and one of the trade partners, the drywaller, about when this certain drywall was installed. And that question was quantified into a $50,000 change order, which basically meant like whoever was right would have to eat the 50K. And there was no time to lose. This project was delayed and there was no excess budget. So the GC eating 50K means they're not making profit off the job. It was getting to that level. Pretty bad.
Right.
And what Tim did with the drywall contractor was like, okay, let's just look at the instant replay. It's an open space. It's very obvious that I am right. Like we can just see it. You can't argue with it. And then what was cool is that guy wasn't all PO'd about it. He's like, well, all right, that's the fact. So that's on us.
Black and white. Yeah.
It's very cool. Like, because I was like, are they going to not like this? But I think these guys don't want to have conflicts,
Yeah.
You'd rather not. And they work together over multiple jobs. So like, it's not good to have all these fights. And so they'd rather own it and then learn from it and move on. As one of my mentors and board member says, people will tend to favor their own version of reality if they lack facts, and we provide that fact basis for them. So that was like, after a few months, like 50 grand, like saved in 5 minutes, I was like, okay. At that moment, I was like, all right, this open space thing is a good idea. Like we're
Yeah.
still money. So that was cool. A few more. This is another one that I thought was interesting. So a much bigger project early on, and then the owner was a big tech company in this case, and they're building a pretty big office, and they were getting mad at the general contractor for being delayed. The general contractor was like, "Look, we're not trying to be delayed. It's just that the weather's been really bad, and this project isn't dried in, so it's just a big pit in the ground, and the mud is crazy." And it's like, okay, you can hear that on the other side, and you're like, if you don't trust me, like, you guys are BSing me. Like, you can do work. Come on.
Yeah.
I was talking to this senior project engineer, and he was like, I was in this meeting. It was getting tense. It was not good. And then I pulled up open space and I just showed them the mud so they could just look and see. And there were some workers in there, and their boots were like submerged into the mud. It was like crazy bad. And he was like, it just solved the meeting immediately. It's like, they were like, oh, okay. Makes sense.
It's not opinion at the
Exactly.
it's
And he
documented.
was like,
You can see it.
you can see it. And he's like, I was like, how much money was that worth to you? He's like, I don't know. I can't tell you how much money that saved, but I'm telling you, like, that kind of stuff is what makes projects go south. Are
Yeah.
those sort of conflicts building up? And then I guess one last one, which I'm pretty excited about, is we got to the scale point where people, it's not just those stories, which again, we have lots of those, change order reversed and saving a month of schedule, which is, that's like millions of dollars right there.
Yeah.
But there's enough scale now where people have actually measured the impact and quantified it. And we announced an insurance partnership earlier this year. It's pretty simple. Like, if builders use open space, then they can save up to 25% on their insurance premium. And that,
Wow.
by the way, is a huge chunk of the budget for some of these projects. Generally
Yeah.
speaking, far more than the cost of the software itself, right? So it's like
Wow.
literal ROI. It's like, you could
Straight
not
away.
do what Space does at all. You're the CFO of a builder. You're like, let's just use it. I don't even care. My projects are instantly more profitable.
Right.
And that's exciting. I mean, that's a huge win. And it's like, well, why is this insurance company called Shepherd doing this? It's because they just proved, I mean, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They just studied, and they can see that builders that use our technology have way, way, way fewer claims. Like, the claims frequency goes way down. And you can kind of put two and two together to say why. If you use something like us, you can just spot issues before they become claims, because you have that fact record. And by the way, if
Huge.
something does become a claim, you can resolve it way faster. A lot of what goes into an insurance premium is the budget the carrier has to spend on adjusting claims, like seeing who's right and who's wrong. And if you
Yeah.
can take cost out of that makes it so you can provide insurance way more cheaply. And just to give a sense of scale, like, for a run-of-the-mill project, like, the total insurance costs are like multiple single digit percentages of the job. That's a lot. Like, $100 million project, you're spending like $2 or $3 million on insurance. It doesn't go to labor, it doesn't go to materials, it just goes into insurance. And in some areas, that's a lot more than that. And so the difference between whether you should build a building or not, whether it pencils where it's profitable, can come down to how much you're paying in
Wow.
insurance. And so, yeah, I mean, who would have thunk a software company like literally reduce the cost of construction? So I'm pretty proud.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. Big impact straight away.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears now, because I want to talk about team building, obviously something very close to my heart, being in the recruiting world. And as a CEO, obviously assembling the right team is crucial. What qualities do you prioritize in candidates, especially for open space?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. And I would say, like, my first meta answer is it depends not just on the role, but at the stage of the company and the type of person you might need from point A to point B to point B to point C to point D. I mean, great people can evolve through that, but not always. And so my answer might be different at different stages.
Yeah.
But if I really boil it down, and I'm talking about executives here, I would say you want intelligence, like raw brain power. If the person isn't smart, then they could have all the best qualities in the world, but they'll just take too long to get stuff done. Um, I think the second thing is they need to have energy. Like that is like seems weird, but just the drive to do stuff. And that
Yeah.
waxes and wanes for different people, you know? It just does. Like sometimes in your life you're ready to really dive in and go crazy on something, and sometimes you need to recharge your batteries, and you just need to like get people at the right time when they're ready to really go in and work hard.
Right.
Um, and then of course the right amount of experience, especially for executive leaders. Like you want like they need to have a learner mindset. If they feel like they know everything, then it's going to be a disaster. Uh, but you don't actually be funding their learning on the basic stuff. They need to kind of
Yeah.
know what to do to a certain degree. So there's some balance there. So like energy, intelligence, and experience is what I would say. You know, I got this. I was at this one of these like biz dinner things, which one goes to, um, and there was it was cool. So the CEO of LinkedIn was there, who's a really cool guy, and we were kind of going around the table like, what's a piece of advice that you heard that you wanted to share? And you know, LinkedIn's owned by Microsoft, right? So his boss is the CEO of Microsoft, and Satya Nadella, and he had this piece of advice that was really good. It's been sticking with me. It's like for anybody, but especially for leaders, you want to leave every conversation with more clarity than you found it, and with more energy than you found it. And
Yeah.
last thing, like clear roadblocks for your team. And I was like, that's really a good piece of advice, and it's not easy to do, but looking for people that can do that is key, and they're both important. Like establishing clarity requires some discipline and making tough choices, but it also requires a certain amount of information processing and deciding stuff. And the energy thing is really important too. You know, like if you go into a conversation and you're right, but you're kind of it's sort of down, it's not great. By the way, you
Right.
can I don't mean you always have to be happy. Like energy can sometimes be like critical energy. Um, but you need that. You need both. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I guess that's how I'd answer your question as I think about it today.
That's, yeah, really great points and great advice. I mean, you said something that I think just to double down on it, and that I believe very strongly in as well. It's like the same people that get you from point A to point B aren't the same to go from point B to point C, etc. And as you scale as a company, I always talk about it as like shedding staff. Ideally, you can retain them and repurpose them and things like that. But some people are just built for, pre-seed to seed or pre-seed to A round. And when you want to scale or when you need like more product knowledge or commercial knowledge or whatever it might be, hiring the people, like you said, you don't want to be paying for them to learn. So they need to have that foundational experience, but be a continuous learner, especially in a new industry, especially in something that's so like cutting edge.
Yeah, and that people being good at a certain stage, there's like nothing wrong with that. You know, like
Yeah.
that is fine. And I think people that know that about themselves are going to be happier because they're going to get into stuff
Yeah.
that they like. And by the way, I don't view that as this fixed thing. You know, you can be at different points in your life and experience. Um, you can you can be in the mode for one stage versus the next too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Definitely.
there could be a time in your life where you're like, I really want to be early, and then you're like, you know, I really want to spend time at a more growth stage, and that can
Mm.
reflect. You just need to catch the opportunity at the right time with where your own headspace is at.
Definitely. What stage are you guys in?
We're Series D, D as in
Okay.
dog. So I very much view us as a startup for sure, but it's not like early.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what that means to me is like, have we built something people like? Yes, check. Can we make money off it? Yes. Check. Can we scale that? Yes. Are we scaling it in a profitable way? Yes. And then it's like, okay, then you move the goalposts. It's like, okay, can you scale that again and keep those factors the same?
Yeah.
And can you do it now based on where the market is today than what it was 2 years ago? So we still have a lot to prove, for sure. But it's a little bit different than, when we first started.
And how big's the team now?
We have, 190 people, something like that.
So yeah, pretty great, good size.
Yeah.
Just last question on the hiring side of things. Some people think about hiring. If you're hiring fast, you can, especially if you're scaling, right? Some companies get influx cash. They're like, hey, we just need to fill these seats, we need to fill these heads, etc. But then that can obviously lead to compromising on the talent quality or culture fit, etc. Especially in these scaling startups. What's your take? Do you prioritize speed or meticulous selection when you're building your team?
I guess it depends on what pain I experienced most recently. I think one of the mistakes we've made, and I think we corrected for. By the way, if this conversation was the mistakes I made podcast, it could be like Lord of the Rings length level. But I do think that you're better off being very intense on setting the bar for your talent, at the expense of going more slowly than the other way around. I would say you had to pick something. And by the way, it's not even necessarily whether people are good or bad or in some intrinsic way. It's just like, is it the right type of person, and are you setting them up in the right way at that time? So I think at open space, one thing I think I made a mistake on is when we were really adding a lot of people quickly. I was like, well, obviously I can't talk to all these candidates that we're looking to hire. That's crazy. So whatever, you know? I think that was not right. I think it would have been a good use of my time to actually meet each and every single person that we were recruiting at every level of the company, down to those bottom, or sorry, the top three candidates of the bottom of the funnel. So I think it would have just helped create more coherence. And it might have taught me, like, well, what do we actually really, really need? Because I think it's easy when you're in a scale up situation, two things. One, you view the solution to every problem as like a hiring thing. Oh, we'll hire people to do that, which is definitely not always true. Like, I think it's better to be like, okay, we only need to do X. Who here could do that? I think is a better way to think about it. And then the second thing is you sort of view things in this very dry kind of quantitative sense. It's like, okay, well, if we have, what's the ratio of sales reps to CS to ISRs, or what's the ratio of PMs to engineers, and blah, blah, blah. And you get a little bit more divorced from what you actually are trying to do as a company. And that can allow you to kind of get a little away from who you actually need and what kind of person you really, really want. And it's not fair to those people you bring onto your company that aren't going to be the right fit. It means that you're wasted some of their time, or bringing them into a situation where they can't be successful. So yeah, I would say, like, especially for founders, like, even after your 50th employee, after your 150th, like, try to interview each and every single person. That's just one solve for the problem. I think there's other things that could help to keep your eye on. But that's how I would think about it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, look, before we begin to wrap, let's talk about the future for open space. Are there any upcoming projects or innovations or technologies that you're particularly excited about, or anything that you can share with the listeners?
Yeah, totally. Well, some of it's secret, but some of the stuff I will share that I'm excited about is we have been, I guess maybe two things. Like, one is we have a a partnership to do what is called progress tracking in the industry. And this is basically like, can you, using the data that is collected from reality, actually measure whether people are going to finish a project on time?
Mm.
And we built products to do that, one called Open Space Track, and we've expanded that to something called milestone tracking. I think it's really pretty incredible. It's like you using Open Space as is, and now you can get this dashboard that is like, is this going okay or not? And it provides a set of facts in a simple way to help manage the project. And the PMs and superintendents can decide what they want to do about it, but they're not having to like do all this grunt work to track this stuff. They can sort of get it reported to them and then do what they do best, which is like make decisions and build buildings. So that's pretty cool. It's called milestone tracking. It's partnered with a company called Disperse, and they're great. I mentioned this insurance savings thing, which is super exciting, and we want to continue to bang the drum on that one, because I think it's a big deal for the industry. And then the third thing on the technology side is we're pioneering what we call spatial AI. And what we mean by that is a combination of spatial computing. And people might have heard this term, like Apple uses to describe their Vision Pro headsets, but really just means computers being aware of real physical reality, which, yes, you can do with like a Vision Pro, but you can also do with a thing called a camera or a smartphone camera, right? That type of data gathered by computers from real physical reality and combining it with the latest in artificial intelligence to make sense out of that data. It's pretty exciting stuff. Like, it's early, but we've done some pretty interesting experiments where you can ask open space like a question about where is this pile of drywall or that sort of thing, and it knows, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
So like it'll point to like here, and here. So it's different than what people think of as large language models today, in that a lot of what people think about there are like text-based systems like chat and
Right.
documents. It's much more about real physical reality data, making sense out of it. So it's kind of pioneering new cutting edge technology, but building on some of these existing techniques. So, you've got some nice stuff in the works in the labs on that front, and I'm excited to keep exploring it and then bring it to market in the next.
Sounds exciting.
Soon.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. I'm a big believer that the biggest impact AI is going to have is at that intersection of the physical world, hardware, and AI. So I love to hear this stuff.
Yes, me too. The real physical world is bigger than the internet. There's a lot of stuff out there, and so much of our lives, and I guess the economy is based in the real world.
Yeah.
So like, and I don't think software companies have been really able to solve problems for people that work in real physical reality until recently. So that's kind of the dent.
So true. So true. All right, just to wrap, if you could go back and there was one piece of advice that you could give your younger self about your journey or entrepreneurship, what would you say?
I would say, man, that's a great question. And I've been asked that multiple times. If I have a different answer each time, so maybe I should just like get straight on it and remind myself more often.
Depends on the day.
Yeah, it depends on the day. But you know what I'd have to say is, like, once you've gained a little bit of experience, it could be just 3 to 5 years, like your emotions or your intuition is going to point in the right direction most of the time. And so listen to it, and then don't be afraid to act on it faster than you otherwise would. Because if you're fully in just an intellectual mode, you might come to the same decision, but it might take you 3 to 6 months longer, which in time is money, man. I mean, it's not great to have to wait that long. So I think I would tell my past self, if you're feeling a certain way, don't just sit in that feeling for that long. Like, write down why and what you might do with that. Okay, actually, here's what I'd say. Stress is thought without action. Like, that is something I believe. Like, when you're stressed, it means you're thinking about something, not doing something about it. So when you feel that, just like write it down and what you might do to alleviate the stress. And that might be the thing you need to do. It might get you to do something. Maybe it's a day sooner, maybe it's a year sooner, and that can really benefit you.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Well, look, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for all of the insights, for sharing about open space, everything you guys have worked on, your career path. Where can our listeners find you and find the company and follow along for your progress?
Yeah, so our website is openspace.ai. You can stick that in your browser. We publish a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, like a lot of companies serving other companies do. So if you just
Nice.
look at openspace.ai on LinkedIn and follow us, then you can see what we're up to. And then you can find me that way. And Jeevan Kalanithi is my name, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. That's probably the best place to go.
Perfect. I will get the team to put all of that in the show notes as well for ease. But yeah, I look forward to seeing everything that you guys do. Sounds super interesting, and I'm sure it's going to have a huge impact or continue to have a huge impact on the industry.
Yeah, well, we're just doing our part. So thanks so much for having me, Greg.
My pleasure.